Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our inaugural episode of a brand new show, Screened Plays, brought to you by the Cup of Hemlock Theatre. I will be your host for this episode, and we welcome you to this brand new series where we will be exploring film adaptations of stage plays. To kick off our very first episode, we thought we'd go back to one of our OG root review shows that we did way back when, and that is the Tragedy of Macbeth, which starred Denzel Washington, Frances McDormand, and was directed by Joel Cohen. And so we went to this film first because if you remember all the way back in episode 3 of The Cup, we covered the Stratford production that starred our dear friend Bridget as one of the witches. So it felt very fitting that we kick off the inaugural episode of this brand new series with another Shakespearean adaptation. So here we go. And joining us today, we have a fantastic panel, some familiar faces, and a very special brand new face, my dear friend from Stratford Shakespeare School, and he also is a filmmaker now, as well as an aspiring musical writer too. Surprise. Yes, it is my friend Jamie. Hello, Jamie.
Thank you for having me, Mac. I'm super excited to be here and discuss the movie.
Yes, welcome aboard. Welcome aboard. It's so great to have you here. We met all the way back when we were doing, I believe it was Midsummer we did at Stratford.
That was it, yeah. So long ago.
So long ago.
Great times, though.
They were very good times. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Jamie. Who are you? What are you working on right now? And then what is in your cup today?
Great. Yeah, like Mac said, my name is Jamie. I met him back in the day when we were in a Stratford camp together, what we call like the boot camp at Stratford, which was an amazing experience. Great training. I guess I would qualify. I'm a writer-director, I could call myself. I graduated for a 4-year program at Humber College. I just made my first feature film last summer called The Pine Still Whisper. So we are currently in post for that. And yes, I am, writing constantly, working on a bunch of projects and trying to kind of get them greenlit for when this movie comes out. So yeah, super excited about that and super excited to be here and talking about this movie because I have a lot to say about it.
Wonderful. And what is in your cup?
Oh yes, I got water.
Love it. The classic. Can't beat a nice, good, refreshing glass of water.
Agreed.
And, of course, also joining us is our associate producer, Ms. Jillian Robinson. Hello, Jill.
Hello, Mac.
How are you? What is your ensemble today? What is in your cup?
I'm doing well, thank you. Yes, my ensemble. I thought I would just go for like a little black blazer on my sort of whitish background, kind of, the black and white filming, right? And then my earrings are little like water droplets, but they have hearts in them too. So there's a lot of water droplet action that happens in this adaptation, and then the hearts to show like the love and bonds of I kind of just made that up on the spot, but I think it works. Sounds good. Validate it.
I would not have known you made that up on the spot.
To go on the water train too, I'm drinking my water in a little like flute just to feel fancy today, and it's actually pineapple bubbly. Is my type of water. So that's
very
me
nice.
Today.
And of course, we have one of our most regular guests, or shall I say co-hosts, my co-artistic producer, Mr. Ryan Borochovitz. Hello, Ryan.
Hello, Max. So good to be here talking about adaptations and Shakespeare, two things I love.
Yes. You missed our original Mackers panel.
Well, yeah, I watched it, obviously, and helped write the questions for it, but no, I gave my spot to Bridget, and I'm so glad I did, because she had such wonderful insights.
Yes. So what is in your cup today, sir?
Oh, I have coffee, and it's in my The Cup cup. Hey, that's the show you're watching right now.
Very good. Very good. And I also see you're also rocking the black attire to fit the occasion.
The grayscale of the film. I don't have a lot of different shirts, so this is what we get.
I picked out his shirt.
Yeah, she picked it out.
Well, Jill, you should look into being a stylist.
I opened up my closet and said, which one of these is the most Macbeth? And she said the gray one. And I'm like, okay.
Love that. And I am rocking my OG Mackers panel outfit, as well as the Stratford Mackers tie. with the red, with the hints of red. And then tonight, I'm also drinking from the Cup as well, but I am drinking another red drink, the seasonal Canada Dry cranberry.
Nice
drink.
That is going fast in stores right now, Mac. I'm surprised you got your hands on some.
I got 2 cases because I'm like stocking up, man.
Yeah,
Stock it up.
Damn spot.
Out damn spot. Actually, I think I have that eraser somewhere on my desk.
That's funny.
So very good. All right, well, let's dive into this film because we have a lot to talk about. Just so everybody knows, this was filmed during the pandemic. Like it started filming, then it stopped filming for a few months, and then it finished in the summer of 2020. So this was all shot during the pandemic, which is a very unique time capsule moment there. And as we said, it stars Denzel and Washington and Frances McDormand as Macbeth and Lady Macbeth as well. And so let's get first into Joel Cohen's adaptation and interpretation of this iconic play. What are our thoughts? Jamie, as our newest face to the panel, we will let you lead this first topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So I avoided this movie for a while, and there's, I think, a few reasons why. And one of the reasons is the cinematography for me. I think a lot of people watch it and they're like, wow, this is like such a unique way to do it and tell the story. But for me, I was like, oh, wait, this is, this looks like Throne of Blood, like Kurosawa's version of, Macbeth. Yes. And it looked like The Lighthouse. And so I think that we're getting into that trend now where it's like, we're going to make a movie 4:3. We're going to shoot in black and white, and it's going to be really artsy and different. So I was like, kind of resisting that. I was like, I've seen this before. I'm going to wait. And you know what? When I started it, I was like, okay, I was kind of resisting that still, but it really won me over. And I think a lot had to do with the performances were incredible. Like just Denzel, Frances, even the supporting cast, they just made it really believable and real. I love the stuff they did where stuff in the play stuff that isn't in the play is, added to the movie, like, stuff with Fleance and Ross and stuff like that. And yeah, as much as I was resisting that whole, I've seen this before, I mean, the cinematography, the visuals, everything, it was beautifully done. I would say I would give it like, a solid like 8 out of 10, maybe 8.5 for Shakespeare adaptions for sure. I think it's really good. I like what they brought to it. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at. I have a few gripes with it, which I'll go into in detail after. It's more like from a filmmaking perspective of maybe stuff I would have done differently. But yeah, really, really well done.
Yeah. Love that. Jill?
Yeah, so I liked it. I don't think I have as much of a liking quantity as Jamie. So I guess I definitely liked it, but I didn't love it, is kind of where I'm at. I thought a lot of the things hit the mark aesthetically. There was a lot of capturing moments, like due to our lighting, the cinematography, the choice of delivery of speech, like all the different elements that made the production what the production was. There were definitely moments that were captivating, but also a lot of things that didn't. So I kind of felt that a bit jarring of kind of going in between, oh, that's really cool, to like, okay, that moment wasn't earned. Like, I just was a lot of ping-ponginess for me, I guess, in that way of talking about it. I did appreciate it kind of being an experimental production, I think, both in the way that it was filmed and in what they did with the original text. So I always think like kudos to that, right? To even just taking the plunge of trying something different and shaking things up. But for lack of a better visual pun, it was overall lackluster in my opinion. Like it was a bit gray. And again, I think it's because I kept being jolted between really enjoying it and other moments not. So yeah, so it didn't really necessarily help in those moments that it was just I was watching black and white film and didn't really have any other the vivacity to keep me invested. But yeah, so I was kind of hoping too that because this was this black and white take on like visually, like just stripping all of the color. I guess Jamie would probably know more of what I'm trying to say of like what that's called in film when you just do something in black and white. But I was hoping that kind of the text and the storytelling would then take over and be like way more packing a punch and powerful. And again, we'll get into this as we continue the conversation, but that didn't happen for me. So it was kind of just a lot of different choices that were good on their own, but as a package deal, didn't fully sell me. So I like it, but I didn't love it. That's where I'm at.
I like that. Ryan, as our man of adaptation, where do you stand on this?
So I think certainly closer to Jamie's take than Jill's on this one. I enjoyed it a lot. And I guess, well, first of all, I'll say my previous favorite film adaptation of this particular play is unfortunately tainted by The Crimes of Roman Polanski, which is unfortunate, but I love that film. I thought it was really great, and it's just really hard to revisit and watch, and as so many of his very great films are, which is just an unfortunate fact of life in the world. But yeah, so I never saw the Michael Fassbender one, which I know is probably the more immediate frame of reference that people have for this play and adaptations thereof. But yeah, I enjoyed it a lot, and I think what I liked most about it is the way that it was just an exercise in raw, pure filmmaking, that I've seen no lack of productions of Macbeth on the stage and even pro shots of stage productions. And I liked that this was very self-consciously a film. And if you're going to make a film of a play, you don't want it to just look like a pro shot of the stage version. We have no lack of those, that they are really employing filmmaking techniques, having this like beautiful cinematography and the editing. And even if it was sometimes a little gimmicky and flourishy, which your mileage will vary as to how much that bothered you, I thought it was the best possible use of the not huge budget they had to make an actual, like a proper film adaptation of this play that isn't just a straightforward reproduction of something you might see on stage. So I enjoyed it a fair bit, mainly on those grounds.
Wonderful, wonderful. I will say for me, compared to the last film adaptation of Macbeth, which is the Michael Fassbender version, which had a much vaster scope, I will say I liked Cohen's adaptation more, even though it is a more barren production. Like when you watch the Fassbender one, the trailers made it seem like it was going to be Braveheart doing Shakespeare, which I was really excited about. Wasn't the case. They were trying to go for what this film was, which was more of that psychological, tight close-up, inner mind destruction work, which I felt this film did a lot better. And that's what I enjoyed about this, was that they did capture some of that more internalized mechanisms that were going on compared to, say, Fassbender, where you got the same type of close-up like the one behind me, but I couldn't tell if his mouth was moving or if it was a voiceover. And they had no pace. This film actually did a really good job. Joel did a really good job of keeping this film's pace up. It always was moving. There was always something happening on screen, whether it was the murder of crows or ravens flying through or the water dripping, or there was somebody moving in the shadows in the back. There was always something moving to keep the piece moving forward. And that's what this piece really needs to sell it, is the pace has to be up. And we talked about this when we saw Bridget's productions. They did a very good job of keeping those scene transitions fast, and everything was moving and it never let you stop. Because once the murder of Duncan, or even once the Macbeth meets the witches, the play should just fly. It's Shakespeare's shortest. And in order to really kind of capture the madness of the spiral that the Macbeths go on, you need to have pace. And I felt this one did a much better job having pace and move things along. And I really enjoyed that in particular. I also like Joel's work and his creative ways of transitioning shots. Like his choices there, like the choice of throwing Macduff's son off the balcony into the fire below, and the smoke from the fire then envelops him and you're into a whole new scene. That was a really cool moment there. Doing something like that classic old Hollywood magic, like the fact the water comes through the floor, right, when he's doing the scene with the witch, or witches, but really it's a witch there, and just playing with the reflections in the water. Just those little things that are like the old Hollywood. Like this felt like a very old Hollywood movie, because it was all done on sound stages. It was not performed or filmed elsewhere. So everything was done indoors. It almost felt like a really well done TV movie, almost, but like at a higher budget production level, because the sets were literally barren. And the fact that it's all black and white, you kind of can hide like the lack of color, or some of the lack of details that you may see if like the stone was colored, things like that. But it all looked kind of like a really nice well done TV movie that was really kind of like, they used to do them in the 60s. It's where 12 Angry Men started. It was like staged plays, but made to look like a film type thing. And it's that same type of feel I got for it. So it really kind of felt nice to be harkening back to that old Hollywood, old TV style of performance. And it worked. I really did enjoy it. It's definitely played more into the psychological horror elements. And then the whole concept of, I felt Joel really used the shadow as well, having people move in and out of those shadows. So you never quite knew who was going to pop out of where at what time. I love the fact that Ross just keeps showing up everywhere. And I mean,
we're going to talk about that. So
yeah, we're going to talk about that.
I mean, at first I thought he was Seton or whatever, or Satan, whatever that one character is. That's kind of the devilish character. Turns out he was Ross, so that's fine. But just the fact that his costume is a bit Raven-like too was a really good touch. We'll get more into that later on. If you think about the wings of his coat, they were very bird-like. So very well done there. But yeah, so I would say, this definitely was a better film adaptation. But like Ryan, unfortunately, the first film version I ever saw back in the day when I was 10 years old and I was starting to learn about Shakespeare because I had to learn the Tomorrow and Tomorrow monologue for my first ever audition, was the Roman Polanski version, which still sticks with me. There are images from that film that are still haunting in there, like them burying the stuff in the sand at the beginning, or just, I forget the actor who plays Macbeth in that one, just that slow walk down the stairs after Lady M's thrown herself from the tower and he's doing the Tomorrow monologue, and just some of that production design of the armor and the combat was just so bloody and wonderful.
Such a personal film to Polanski at the time too.
Yes.
Like there's just something so personal in that adaptation. You can feel his pain, his anger at the world, and it's a different experience. I think that's my favorite adaptation as well. I agree with Ryan. It's painful watching these filmmakers' films. Like, for example, Midnight in Paris is one of my favorite movies. It's hard to watch because Woody Allen, same with Polanski, but you can't deny that, the Macbeth that Polanski did was incredible.
Yes. It definitely is like a benchmark that other films are now trying to surpass or outdo in some way or another. So yeah. All right. Let's get into the next question, which is, what are our thoughts on the performances of Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand as our main titular couple? Jill, I'm interested to hear what you think of them because you were a bit more mixed. I think Ryan, Jamie, and I are a bit more on the positive side. You seem a bit more on the shaky ground side of things.
So I just want to start with Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand. I love you both so much. You inspire me so much. So whatever I say, please don't shun me if I ever have the ultimate opportunity to work with you. No,
Denzel, if you're watching this, hello. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you for watching. Big fans.
Okay, so I have a lot. Well, not like a lot. I can definitely spark notes it, but I loved. This is going to sound odd, but they had awesome street chemistry, and by that I mean I think both of them were masters of. This is a text that is done ad nauseum by theater companies, by productions that have been passed. These words have been spoken. These words have been heard. We are going to say them like humans. So, I really appreciated their relationship. In my opinion, was the most humanized Mackers relationship I've seen. The text, it's almost like when they were in scenes together, the text was stripped of heightened. The poetry was there and stunning and beautiful, but it was like Frances and Denzel having a conversation as the Macbeths. And that was really cool. I really loved that because I think it just added a subtlety and a simplicity to this marriage, which I feel like often, and rightfully so, things happen so quick in this piece, and they're usually not seen on stage together because both of them are masterminds when they are on stage doing what they need to do. So very little do we get a genuine intimacy. And I think just the way that they delivered their text together, they lifted each other up in a subtle and simplistic way, which I thought was really breathtaking to see. So talking about them just individually too, Frances McDormand, I love her. I've loved her since she was, I don't remember her name, but in Madeline. I used to watch Madeline, the live action
Oh, she
of
was
Madeline.
the nun. She was the nun in that, wasn't she?
I forget her name, though. That's really bad. I'm so
Genevieve?
sorry, Frances. No, but that's my first seeing of her, and I've loved her since then, and literally everything she does, 3 Billboards, Chef's Kiss. So I think the way she did Lady M was awesome. I was yes, every time she was on screen. The one thing that I didn't like, and I don't think this is her fault, I think it would have fallen on Joel as the director, is her downfall. I thought was very rushed and quickened. That's the same thing as rushed, but rushed and like not earned. Like I feel like we did a big jump to her scenes, and again, I think that's like editing and something in the direction. So I don't think that was necessarily on her part. And I think that's a good segue to Denzel as well. I did not like his smackers at all, actually. I think I saw what he was trying to do with it, of making it more psychological or maybe making it more human. But I was constantly confused in the beginning scenes because I was just left with like a very flat delivery of stuff. There wasn't anything to me like cooking underneath. Like to me with Mackers, like it needs to be surprising that he's an animal by the end of it, but I need to kind of see that he has that capability when he's not animalistic. And again, maybe that wasn't the direction, right? Like maybe that wasn't even Denzel. Like we know what Denzel and Frances are capable of. When he did swing and pivot to the throne room scene where he like is like the leaves have just blown in, right? And he's like super lost his marbles. I actually kind of like laughed a little bit when he had like an outburst moment because I'm like, this didn't feel earned. Like it was a very quick, like too quick of a pivot to, I wasn't scared. And like, there's some element of like fear you need to get, right? And like even the characters in the space with him, I was like, he's not like overbearing, high status lookout, like, you know, Captain Jack Randall from Outlander. Like that's the kind of intensity like I want to be feeling. So again, I didn't get that either. And it's almost like, and then I kind of went back to their like simplistic, subtle delivery as a couple. And I was like, okay, but in order for that to work individually, they can't be, right? I feel like there needed to be that swing of them as individuals. And it's when they're coupled that they can ease off and be humans, but when they're on their own, they're wild childs, right? Like I feel like that's such a cool core theme to explore with the Macbeth. So yeah, that's a huge deep dive into them. But yeah, I have more to say for the next question too, to reify why I wasn't impressed with our titular characters, in particular Denzel. But yeah.
Jamie, counterpoint. You said you were a fan of Denzel in this.
Well, yeah, no, I am a fan of him in this, and I'm a fan of Frances, but I have a lot I agree with Jillian about, because the one thing she brings up, which is really fascinating to me, and I agree with, is I think they do have a bit of a pace problem, and I think there's a lot of time spent with extra scenes on different characters, like the Ross character, or, Fleon, stuff like that, when I felt, you're so right, like, I would have liked more time spent on extra scenes with Lady Macbeth and Macbeth, seeing them kind of go on this downfall, like either moments of interiority where they're just standing and watching out on the horizon or something like that. I wanted to see more into like the psychological aspect of them a bit, because you're right, when it will just cut to a scene and then it'll be like, okay, this is happening now, this is happening now, this is happening now, but we never really stay with them. And that's the one thing I didn't like about the pacing, and that's why probably I want to give this movie like an 8.5 or a 9. I'd probably settle at an 8. And yeah, I really like the way they did that, the subtlety in their line reading, which you said as well, that human aspect, that human quality to it. But yeah, I agree. And maybe by talking about this, my opinion may slowly go down to like a 7.5. I don't know, because I am agreeing with these opinions.
Each question, sure. Jamie goes down at the end of it. And he's like, I'm going to give it a 2 out of 10.
yeah, it was terrible, actually. No, yeah, I think there needs to be that savagery to Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. And yes, as great as great as the scene was, where she's washing her hands and she's talking about the spots and the servants are looking at her and the doctor like, what the hell is going on? It didn't feel earned, where they focused so much on the other characters. They could have focused on a few extra scenes. Why not add a few extra scenes here? It could have been a 2-hour movie. It didn't have to be an hour and 45. And I think I was missing that between them. And maybe Denzel played it a bit too subtle. And he could have gone a bit more. And here's a good example. That scene where they added that extra scene where the traitor's going to get executed at the beginning. And they pull back the curtain, they reveal him there with his sword. I'm shocked that they didn't they didn't have him execute that guy, because that would have shown.
I was so mad.
Yeah, he's ambitious, he's savage, he wants to get ahead. Whereas he walks away, and that kind of doesn't really make sense compared to what he does later on in the film, which is brutal.
I almost wanted that to happen, because then it would have been a bookend, and it would have explained why the middle part of it was maybe a bit more underwhelming.
And that guy's the Thane of Cawdor, whose title he is literally taking in that moment.
Yeah.
It would have. Yeah, I agree. So much more symbolism if he's the one who does the killing blow.
In the play, he does. I mean, just the whole thing that the Thane of Cawdor is like. It does. They talk about the sword going from like Nave to somewhere else.
No, that line is about his conquests in battle against Norway, I think it is.
Okay.
Whereas, the Thane of Cawdor is then mentioned shortly after as the traitor who let the Norwegian army get the leg up on them. So then, in the Polanski version, they add a scene of him being hung, the Thane of Cawdor. But Macbeth isn't present during that part then either. So the fact that they did put them face to face, the old Thane of Cawdor and the new Thane of Cawdor, specifically when we know it is going to be through violent means that he's going to take his next title that the witches promised him, i.e. king, that, I agree that it felt like a missed opportunity in that moment.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess I'm halfway. Like, I feel they were great performances. I think as a director myself, there were things I look at that I would have probably done differently, and I agree completely with you. Seeing him kill the Thane of Cawdor would have been really powerful to take his next place.
Yeah. Ryan?
Yeah, I don't know how much a lot there is to add. I'm fairly in agreement with both of you in your assessment. I felt it, to me, both of them are stars. Denzel and Frances, who I guess we're all on first name basis with.
Yeah.
And Joel, too, our good friend Joel, one half of the Coen brothers. They were very understated performances, and I think that does, at times, it worked really well, playing into the subtlety that both of you have already commented on, but at other times it just felt like there was something missing. It didn't really feel like either one of them is giving their A game, and because we've all seen both of them give their A game in other projects, it's a shame that this feels like an actor's playground, these roles. It really is something that you could really just dive into and give it your all, go through these huge highs and lows, and I didn't really feel like I saw that from either of them. And now something I will comment on that I think maybe gets lost in the wash of these conversations is, I guess this is a little complicated. Okay, and I mentioned this just on an episode we did fairly recently on the Real Canaan Theater's production of Merchant of Venice. It just came up in one of the many side tangents that came up in that panel. Have any of you been following this weird backlash to a Little Mermaid trailer that came out recently? And if so, you probably know where I'm going with this point. Now, personally, I remember when this movie came out, and was there? I don't remember there being a big backlash to Denzel playing Macbeth. Now,
well, he's done it on Broadway. He's played Mackers on Broadway.
And I think there's probably two big reasons why he doesn't get the same backlash that a young new actress that nobody's ever heard of before does. But one of them is because he's done well. He's Denzel, and he's done well. We all love Training Day, so of course he's going to get a lot of benefit of the doubt in going in. And the other big reason being that I guess people who are perpetually online and have a lot of very strong feelings about Disney movies doesn't necessarily always overlap in the Venn diagram with people who have strong opinions about artsy Shakespeare movies. Maybe. But I do think Denzel as a specific celebrity and, persona identity, aside, just the idea of a Black Macbeth, obviously in the theater, this is nothing new. We've seen all kinds of actors of various races and ethnicities play all kinds of Shakespeare roles. But there's actually a pretty interesting book about this, a book of scholarly essays. I think it's called Wayward Macbeth. I don't remember who the editors were, about how we tend to think about Othello as the Black Shakespeare play, of course, for good reason, but that there's this very long, interesting scholarly and theatrical tradition of Macbeth either being played by Black performers or just having ideas of Blackness and Black history and Black identity kind of permeating through it. So, and why I'm bringing this up, not just because of recent events that maybe make us think about, wow, we really aren't as post-racial as Obama maybe wanted us to think we were, but is, I guess, partly also to comment on, both of you mentioned how there's this maybe absent savagery that is missing from the role. And I would agree with you that I did find it was very understated, but I would also maybe say as a counter argument, Denzel being who he is and the body that he is, I could understand him as an actor wanting to understate that. So that couldn't be viewed as like an argument against him and actors like him and a certain very un-Scottish looking brand of actor playing this role in a certain way. Just maybe something I would posit and put into this discussion. I still felt like there was more room for nuance that could have been portrayed here, but as I've thought about this more and more since watching it, that is a thought that has occurred to me, and it is maybe worth bringing up.
So I'm mixed on this coupling as well. I felt they had decent chemistry with one another, but it didn't blow me away. Like, the Macbeths should have some sexual chemistry with each other. And once again, love Denzel, love Frances. And I don't know if it was because it was like early COVID and people were not doing the, like, trying to keep space between each other on set. And because of that, they weren't allowed to get more intimate with each other. But there just felt like a lack of intimate chemistry with each other. Like they were great scene partners. And as Jill, I agree with Jill, where they were able to naturalize the text to such an extent that it made it feel very unnatural between the two of them. But there wasn't like a palpable sexual chemistry. Like the moments when Mackers comes back from battle and Lady M throws herself into his arms a lot of the times because she's hot and heavy for him and is like super jazzed about what's coming up. Like,
this may not be appropriate to say, but like that scene should be filled with sweat, blood, and semen. And quote.
Yeah. Like, I agree.
Like,
and I didn't believe they were having sex. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you told me those two were doing it, I wouldn't buy it.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the thing there, where it's like they were decent together, but they didn't wow me together. And that was too bad, because I was like, I wanted more. I was like, give me more. Like, show me that chemistry that really just shows. Because, I mean, everybody always describes the Macbeths as like one of the best adjusted Shakespearean couples. And that's kind of scary to think. But they're like really good together. And the fact that we didn't get that really good kickoff for them meant that as their marriage deteriorates over time, there wasn't enough of I didn't see enough of a descent into that. Like, they already felt adrift by the time he shows up and goes, hey, Duncan's coming for dinner. She's like, okay. It's like, I didn't feel the intensity, like those first few scenes of like, stick your courage to the stinking place. It's really like a slap in the face to him. It's kind of like the man up, let's go. Like, and I just didn't feel that urgency between the two of them. Now, maybe it's because they're also playing an older coupling of the Macbeths as well. We just saw Ian Lake, and I forget the actress who played Lady M in Stratford, but they were a much younger, hungrier couple. This is a much more established, older couple of the court. So maybe that's what they were going for. I don't know. It just, for me, didn't have the intensity I wanted in their togethers. And then separately, Denzel, once again, fantastic actor. Malcolm X should have won the Oscar for that. He didn't give me enough range in this performance. Like, I didn't feel his chemistry with Banquo. I didn't feel the friendship between the two of them, which is the tragedy of that, is that he kills his best friend, his brother in arms, basically. Like, I didn't feel the chemistry between the two of them, really. And then the pendulum swinging this character goes through of fearful of doing the deed, hype of coming out of the deed, to then becoming the calm, cool, collected one of the pairing as Lady M deteriorates. There just wasn't enough building blocks put in between to really see that evolution flow. Like, I never felt the fear of him walking off to kill Duncan. That whole dagger speech should be full of fear as you hear the ravens and the night sounds as you're walking through the dark hallways. It's the amp up speech, right? Like it's the pump up. So by the time he says, like, here, I hear not the bell, Duncan, it is the knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell, right? Like, that's his final, like, okay, I'm ready, like, let's go. And then he walks into the room and it's like one little stab. I was like, no, like, like Psycho killing. Let's go, like Psycho in the shower scene. Like, let's get multiple stabbers in here. Like, really go at it. Show me the violence.
To me, like, Mackers and Lady M should be as scary, if not scarier, than the witches.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And like, and also just to talk on the scene you're talking about too, Matt, when he comes back in with those daggers, again, lackluster, I feel like I'm going to say that word so many times this panel, but like of Frances being like, why did you bring those in here? I'm like, oh my God, like, why did you bring those? It like you know what I mean? Yeah. Like the intensity of take the daggers and like throw them against the wall. Like you should be disgust, right? Like there's like a mixture of like disgust, of fear, of rage, of everything, right? And it was kind of like this, like, oh, let's bring these knives back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
And I mean, and then for Frances's performance as Lady M, I wanted more silent scenes with her, showing her deterioration throughout the film. Like there's one really good choice in that Fassbender film, and that is that they have Lady M witness the burning at the stake of the Macduff family, and that seems to be the really big camel that or the straw that breaks the camel's back, basically. That is the thing that really sets her down her path, is that she sees a child burned at the stake, an innocent child that she knows is innocent, and so the fact that we never got really enough reasons why she's deteriorating, and then I never got her trying to cover up Macbeth when in the banquet scene, like the whole no, my lords, he's fine, like don't worry about him, ignore the man behind the curtain. Basically, there was not enough fake royal acting. Basically, it's that thing of let's play this out. Let me put on the facade of the queen of the realm, who is trying to keep the fact my husband's losing it at dinner. Like there was that scene really kind of lost agency to me, because she wasn't hyping it up the same way Denzel was. Like Denzel was literally swatting at invisible crows. Like I was like, okay, Denzel's really going for it in this scene. And then Frances McDormand's like, it's fine, my lords. It's fine. It's like, could you give me a little bit more there? Give me a little bit more agency? Like the fear of watching your husband go mad at dinner in public when you've done a really good job of keeping what you've done under wraps. There should be that sense of fear in that scene of shit. Somebody's going to figure out what's going on. We're going to give the game away in that one moment. That dinner scene is so crucial into building up the psychological core of what's going on in their heads, that it's never quite hit the mark for me.
And I know we're going really long on this one segment, but one thing that's kind of come up that I kind of forgot about, I'm like, wait a second, what? This has to be there. Regardless of how old, like, the couple is, the theme of there not being an heir and then not producing a living heir or a child or a baby, like, you don't have to go ham on that theme, but, like, that should subtextually be there in some shape or form. And one thing that really irked me is, like, the only maternal kind of fling I got from Frances was at the very end, after she grabbed the water from like the tree well thing, and then like grabbed a bit of her shroud, and then it was like, that was it. But like, there's so much you can do with like the lack of child that they have, and especially in contrast to the multiple of children the Macduffs have. Right? And we saw and heard that side of the coin. So I was actually looking back on it frustrated that that was kind of excised out of their relationship, of like the fact that like they didn't have a child. And again, maybe the fact too that this iteration they weren't necessarily as intimate, right? Of what we saw on screen was maybe their relationship wasn't. And so maybe that kind of plays into the fact that it's okay, that side of the story isn't as ratcheted up, right? Whereas when I've seen productions in the past of them being so sexually invested of each other, and they can't even produce the result of what sex biologically is supposed to result in. That's a really cool like pendulum, and like literally the crux of the insanity that is their relationship sometimes, right? So maybe the fact that they weren't intimate with each other, that wasn't shown on screen, that helped to kind of couch the lack of babyness theme between them. But
you might just have a lot of House of Dragon on the brain right now, and that's why royal succession is on the mind.
That too.
Maybe.
But like, there's a lot you can unpack with that. Like, it's, you know, not in the
Yeah.
storyline, right? So
One thing I just want to add as well, I agree with both your points. When you brought up the and Jillian, the violence and the savagery, you're so right. When he kills Brendan Gleeson's character, Duncan, right, the king, it's just, you know, he's sitting there and he's like, and the king's just sitting there, and it's like, it's this like, okay, like he's, come on, like someone do something. And the violence, it's so clean. It's so just, there's not that, you know, it's a simple knife to the throat. He quickly takes out the guards. You know, when a Banquo gets killed, it's just it's a hit to the back. You know, there's not that savagery and violence that these two people are going to react to with these like horrible crimes. Like even when they threw the boy off the thing into the fire, you know, that was brutal, but it's not the same as a Michael Fassbender. Like that stuff really gets the violence right.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, next one, which I think it's going to be a bit of a fun question, which is, what were our thoughts on the supporting cast in this film? Who stood out? Ryan, I will let you start this one.
Okay, like, I don't know how much to even get into this here because we have another question where this might be more appropriate, but Ross, because Ross is a big deal. Sorry, I meant to look up the actor's name before we started.
His name is Alex Hassel. I have him as well.
Yeah, like this might just be something that we're all in agreement with, but I'm going to talk about this more in terms of changes to the text made in this adaptation, as seems to be like the most appropriate place to bring up this character. But he definitely was a standout for me, just in terms of how this character, who is kind of a bit of a nothing character on the page, for most of the time he shows up in a few scenes here and there. He's kind of just one of the background players in court. He has maybe one slightly more notable scene because he's the one who gives the news to Lady Macbeth about her husband. And then he's the one who tells the information to Malcolm and Macduff elsewhere, I think in England. But yeah, I don't want to belabor the point too much about like how much has been done with this character. And I think that's more in terms of a textual adaptation change. But this actor did an excellent job of really making this character someone we could latch onto, who could carry all of these additional scenes, especially since most of these changes were made without any changes to the dialogue, or very few changes to the dialogue. Like the fact that it's just a single glimpse out the window to the riders coming to the Macduff house, and that just like his facial expression, the knowingness of what's coming and how he's expecting it and prepared for it, and then him leaving. Like he's doing a lot of really heavy lifting acting with nothing but his face and posture, and not having the textual support to really back it up. And like Mac, you already mentioned, like his costume was very interesting, very Crow-like, but yeah, his posture, his gait, his body language really is what's communicating that. So again, I'll have more to say about this character soon, but for now, I do want to shout at the actor, who I think is a huge part of why I found the changes made around him so impactful.
I'll piggyback, because Alex was my standout. I never could tell where his allegiance was until the very end, when he's the one that goes and rescues Flea from the witch, aka the hermit character there. So yeah, I mean, he was always just around, and he always just had such a great posture about him, and just he used that subtle flaps of the cape to make himself feel more like he was flying in and out of spaces all the time. Like he was always just there in a moment. Like that's why at first I thought he was that Seaton character that randomly shows up at the end, that we know that never was up earlier in the piece. It's like, where the hell did that guy come from? Like, I thought that's who that was supposed to be. And that's kind of like why he's kind of on the Macbeth side of things. And he's showing up at Banquo's murder and things like that. And that he's kind of in all these places because he's kind of like that potentially ethereal villainous side character that some people have hypothesized as who that character's supposed to be. So there's that. I will say the rest of the cast was a lot of fun, just because it was like a mini Harry Potter reunion in this film. I mean, we had Brendan Gleeson, Mad-Eye Moody as Duncan. We had Harry Melling as Malcolm, aka Dudley Dursley. We had, I forget the actress who plays the witch. Catherine Hunter, who plays Mrs. Fig, cat lady neighbor from Harry Potter 5. And then we have, I forget the actor's name, who's like the page in the opening, who's dying of his wounds. But he's like another supporting Death Eater Amicus Caro from the books as well. So he's there too. So anyway, so it was fun seeing all these great British Harry Potter actors showing up again in the film. I will say though, I wasn't overly happy about Duncan in this. I didn't quite feel the warm, genial energy, particularly between him and Malcolm. I didn't feel that fatherly son bond that really kind of makes the death of Duncan a lot more tragic. Is he's a good leader. He's genial. He's friendly. He's gregarious. Like the Duncan I always picture is kind of like a Robert Baratheon type character. The one that big booming voice, big presence around on stage. You feel his kind of energy about him. And then he's killed off and you're like, oh, that sucks. I liked him. And so that's the thing about like Brendan Gleeson was, once again, he's a terrific actor. Braveheart, so many big things he's been in that are just fantastic. He even played a Newfoundlander recently in a film. It was great. And so his Duncan just felt rather cold in this one. And I just kind of was a little bit let down by that. I was like, oh, great, Brendan Gleeson. I like him and everything. And I was like, okay. Sucks you're dead. You didn't get that. You didn't even get that great of a death scene, sadly, Brendan Gleeson. I wish you were given more. It would have been so much nicer. But there we go. Jill, what are your thoughts?
Corey Hawkins as Macduff. Sorry, I had to sing it. Did that come through? I feel like, sorry, I love Corey Hawkins, Dr. Dre and Straight Outta Compton. Everything he's in, he is like fantastic. And I think he needs to just be more known. Also have a soft spot for Macduff. It's a character that I'm pretty sure in the Macbeth panel I mentioned this.
You did talk about him quite a bit.
I love that character. I would love to play that character, but half of the panel here, I don't know about you, Jamie, thinks that it can't be done, but I will play Macduff.
You sell us too short if you just describe it that quickly without.
But I thought so here's the main reason why I thought his Macduff slayed. We can get into this later too, but shout out to the final scene between Mackers and Macduff. Cinematography, fight choreo, the way that went down. That is the seeing his head severed and dripping blood, that is what I was waiting for. And yes. I was like, of course it took Corey Hawkins to take us home. But he executed the same sort of personification of text that I think Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand did. But so he made it his own while still playing true to what that role is as a device for the plot. So I feel like this probably didn't happen, but it's almost like Joel, our buddy Joel, was said to the actors, don't give me too much, but give me enough. And I think Denzel and Francis were like, okay, we're not going to give you too much, so here it is. But Corey was like, okay, I'm not going to give you too much, but I am going to give you enough. And I think he executed the make the text your own, but realize what your job is to play one of the most revered comeback characters in all of Shakespeare text, right? I was not thrown of look at this hammed up performance. I knew it was the actor portraying this character. And I love when actors do that on stage and on screen, when it's this role has been played over and over again. You're not afraid to make it your own, but you also know that you have a part to play. And I think he did that beautifully. So just two characters I want to subtly mention too, another shout out is Harry Melling as Maltham. I think again, he was to Corey as Denzel and Francis were. I think the two of them, Harry and Corey on the screen together, lifted each other's texts really well. And the thing I liked about Harry Melling's portrayal of Malcolm is he really ratcheted it up, not in a cartoonish way, but ratcheted it up the kind of aloofness and innocence that kind of the sons of Duncan have. But then they instantly kind of switch into understanding what their role is in the hierarchy. When their dad gets off, they're okay, yes, we know what the next steps are. And it's interesting because we all know Harry Melling as Dudley. That's just... It's clear, it took a while for, Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson to break out of Bella and Edward. But I think the way that Harry Melling portrayed Malcolm was I know that you're all going to see Dudley in this character, so I'm going to use that. I'm not going to pretend that you're not seeing Dudley Dursley on the screen right now, but I'm just going to make him Malcolm. And, that's what I felt. And I was like, that's so cool, man. Because that's going to would salvage his career too, obviously. Not that his career is going anywhere, but like I feel like unfortunately some actors that are in big franchises, right, they have to bake themselves out of that.
He's had a very good stage career. Like that's what he's been doing a lot since the films ended. He's done a lot of stage work.
Yeah. So also to add that, Catherine Hunter was on my checkmark list too, because I think everything she's in, she's I think like understated performer, and I think she's brilliant. She's so wise beyond her years, and like there's so much going on. And with this specific adaptation of The Witch and like collapsing 3 characters into one, which like why don't we do that more often? That was really brilliant what they did with the cinematography to lift that. I thought she was awesome, and I had no idea she was a contortionist too. I'm assuming that's her. Maybe it's a body double, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is, because she seems like a lady of many talents. So shout out to my 3. Sorry, that was a tangent, but
Jamie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think Alex Hassel stood out for me the most as Ross. I really like what you all said about his not knowing his allegiance, right? Because, you know, you think he's on Macbeth's side, he's in the court, he's doing all this stuff. And then that end when I loved when he was, you know, hunting Fleance in the field. And then he goes over him and he finds him and they cut. And then they leave that till the ending. And he just had such a beautiful arc. And that final shot where he's riding with the kid on the horseback and the ravens come out. Oh, like that was just, I think that's what sold that I think Ross's character sold the film to me more than Macbeth and Lady Macbeth did. I don't know if that's weird to say, but
no,
I
it makes
love
sense
that
to
whole
me.
story. Yeah, I love that whole storyline. Great change, which, you know, I'll talk about later. Catherine Hunter was unbelievable as the witch. I'm going to definitely like research her stuff after this more and try to find more stuff she's been in. So if anyone has any recommendations, let me know. I agree with Brendan Gleeson. I felt on the one hand, you could say, oh, it's nice that, you know, he didn't really like stand out in terms of or try to overshadow anyone else. But yeah, he was such a cold Duncan. He didn't leave any impression in my head. And I love him as an actor. I think he's fantastic, but he didn't really leave any impression. I think Corey Hawkins as Macduff was amazing. There was just so much like there was like this lyrical fire in the way he talked, and he was like when he had his scene where he was talking about how his wife was killed and reacting to it. I don't know, there was just something so personal that he did within that text that I can't even figure out what that is. But you're right, Jillian, it felt personal to who he is as a person, and not that I know him or I haven't seen a lot with him, but yeah. Amazing job. He made it his own. And then, I really like, you know, Harry Melling. You obviously, you know, you're going to see Dudley Dursley, but he's really nice. And I think he played the innocence aspect really well. He has these really wide eyes and he's just so innocent, right? Yeah. And you know what? Like Bertie Cavill, his name is Banquo. Like, didn't really stand out to me that much as a character. That's one,
which is too bad because he's a great West End actor. Like he was Miss Trunchbull, like the OG Miss Trunchbull in Matilda the musical. He was in Les Mis. Like he's done a whole bunch of he's a big stage West End stage actor. And for me, it was the facial hair on him. That's what threw me off. I didn't know it was him because of that horrible fake eyebrow thing they gave him and the big. It looks like almost like a fake beard. I was like, oh, buddy, you're such a good actor. You're not. This isn't working.
I think Banquo is just on the subject.
Go ahead,
like Banquo is a hard role because he feels very important to the plot, and he is, but he doesn't get a lot of stage time. Yeah, so you really have to, you know, make an impression with him in a very short amount of time. And in this production, he just wasn't treated as the focus. He was there, but understated was the name of the game for a lot of the performers, and I think he did just get lost in the wash a little bit, and no amount of fake eyebrows can save that.
I agree, yes. And one thing as well too is there was a scene where he comes when Duncan arrives at the castle and Banquo shows up with his son, and there's a moment where the son kind of hides behind his father and he's looking at Macbeth with suspicion. And I felt it would have been a lot more powerful if the son was very like, oh, you know, Macbeth's kind of like a father figure to me or like an uncle to me. Like, you know, they've got that bond. I trust him. Whereas I feel like Banquo didn't trust him from the beginning. His son didn't trust him. It would have hit a lot harder if, you know, that kid was like, wow, like we got betrayed. What the heck? That kid knew, like, he was suspicious from the beginning. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next question, and Jamie, I'll let you lead this one because you kind of alluded to this topic already, which is, did the choice to have the film in black and white complement or hinder your viewing experience of the film?
So I will say this. I think it complemented it in the sense it felt like classical cinema, like German expressionism. I put a few references on here. You know, Throne of Blood, they 100% watch that movie because that's in 4:3, that's in black and white. There's shots in this movie that are literally out of Throne of Blood. Chimes at Midnight, the Orson Welles film, I felt there's a lot of references to that, as well as like there was even like some of the close-ups are very like Bergman-esque, like Persona, Seventh Seal. My one problem, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about the budget. So I don't know much about the budget. You told me it was a low budget film. What bugs me sometimes, and honestly, probably I'll end up doing this in my career because I love black and white, and we probably will not have the budget. But if you're going to shoot black and white and you have the budget that the Coen brothers have, don't shoot digital. Like, just don't shoot digital. It looked too clean. And I'm not dissing the cinematographer or anything like that. Mad respect to these people. But it felt, if it was shot in film like they did with The Lighthouse, right, where they had like, old style lenses, really old classic cinematography. If you're going to go down that route with the classic cinematography, just go all the way, right? I think they could have gone all the way because I was watching it and I was seeing such clean detail in their faces, such clean detail in the sets that it looked too digital. And I'm sure that's a budgetary constraint or whatever that is. However, it kind of took me out of the film a little bit because I was like, oh, this is a camera. This is shooting this. It felt like more of a production rather than a classic piece of filmmaking, which maybe that's what they were going for. But yeah, it looked too clean. But production design aspect, amazing. I just wanted that film grain.
I get you. That's actually my note as well. I was like, this feels like kind of like those 1930s old Hollywood horror movies, like Frankenstein, Creature of the Black Lagoon, Dracula. Like, it really kind of felt in that same wheelhouse, particularly with the sets.
For sure.
Being so symmetrical and the shafts of light, things like that. It felt in that era. So it definitely didn't hinder my viewing experience, but I do agree. It definitely felt too digital and clean. Like, it felt like a 4K film when it shouldn't have felt like a 4K film. Like, one of the best things about when you go back and watch the like non 4K version of like Lord of the Rings, the fact that Peter Jackson shot all that on literal film gave it that kind of old grainy feel that kind of just helped inform that land and made it feel more homey and not so digital and refined, which I find is very tough on this new Amazon one, right? It's very pristine and digital, and it's like that works sometimes, but with like this play where you're trying to get gritty and dark, don't be so clean. Be dirty. It's okay.
It kind of felt like with Malcolm and Marie, for example. They shot that digitally. It had that like clean, nice look. I believe they shot it digitally, anyways. This is not the kind of film to do that. Like, embrace the film. Yeah.
Embrace the dirty.
Yeah. Well, embrace the savagery. I think that was all our points to this movie. It needed to be more savage.
More savage.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Ryan?
I'll play devil's advocate on this one, I think, because like the visuals were, I think, what really sold it to me, where like some of the acting and storytelling beats, maybe weren't always up to snuff, and like a lot of the staging of the violence, that's where I find that the savagery is missing. But something I did really just like about the visuals and the monochrome, I think plays into this significantly, is that it had this kind of surreal feeling to it that is very hard to create in the theater. And I think that's kind of what I was getting at in my answer to the first question, is that by having it black and white, there was a lot of images in here. Like, Jamie, you brought up like all these like references from cinematic history and like certainly things that I 100% agree would have inspired this production. But I also feel like there were some visuals in here that reminded me of things I've seen in like images from the theater director Edward Gordon Craig's sketchbook. And like these images that are just like, he has an idea for what a Shakespeare play looks like in a symbolic space of just like lines with no color. And how do you translate that to the stage? Well, it's very hard, and you don't. And I don't know if you ever even realized any of these productions, but doing it in this like very like washed out but almost two-dimensional storybook surreal feeling that we had here, it created a lot. It brought these images to life in ways that I really don't feel like you can successfully do in theater. And yeah, I think the black and white, I don't know, part of me was expecting at one point that we were going to get like a Schindler's List or even Battleship Potemkin, like one spot of red, whether it's a little girl in a little dress or a red flag going up the ship. But and they stuck to their guns and they stayed entirely black and white in it. But I was kind of expecting, I don't know why, if that's like was a justifiable inference for me to have here. But that's like, okay, this, and maybe it is because it was a little too clean, as you've all sort of pointed out, is that like maybe this is going somewhere. There is a point, or maybe, I don't know. Part of me was also maybe picturing maybe would slowly color would come into the world, maybe after Macbeth is killed, and like, we are freed from the age of darkness. I don't know. I feel like for that to make sense, it would have had to start in color, slowly become black and white, maybe so gradually that you don't even notice it, and then we're freed at the end. I don't know, like Dorothy.
Yes,
the reverse Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. Joel, if you make a sequel, you can have any of these ideas. But yeah, I don't know. I felt like a lot of, in the absence of that dirtiness, I felt like there were merits to the cleanness that did make it for an interesting viewing experience. And I don't necessarily want to lose that, even if I totally agree that it might have been more interesting or a different kind of interesting in a different direction.
Jill?
Yeah, not much to add here, folks. I agree with the lens, being like the grittier, not so digitized. I definitely agree with that. But I do also agree with what Ryan was saying. And I guess just to add to this buffet table of opinions, I did find, for the most part, it complemented for sure. The hindrance, I guess I would say too, is when it was very underwhelming acting or stripped down staging and acting was underwhelming. I was a bit bored, and maybe that's just the inner child in me being like, well, if there was a pretty curtain behind them while they were talking so blandly, then maybe I would enjoy this scene. So my attention, it didn't help being black and white in those moments, but I think for the most part, like the specificity of the water dropping, the use of water, the uses of rectangles and squares, erected structures that are decrepit at the same time. Like I was able to really hyper focus on the specificity of those mechanics that when you have that dressed in rainbow colors or look super naturalistic, those things you blink and you miss them, right? Whereas this kind of like made you focus on the cinematography and the certain artistic elements that were actual choices. And what a big standout to me is the transitions. I really loved the transitions in this piece. I thought they were brilliant. Like going from like, this isn't an example, but at one point we went into like a night sky and a moon, but we came from like, I don't remember what it was. It was like someone's cloak or some. It's just that how we changed from one scene to the next was seamless because of the black and white transitions were helping that along, right? Picking up what was being put down and making it something different. So I also really liked too that it kind of enhanced for me, this is going to kind of be a weird observation, but that this is a play on screen, because I think the fact that there was like already minimalist set, like it kind of gives that, but then the fact that you're not watching like the norm of film nowadays is in color, right? It kind of reminds me of like it takes away something that film has given us, right? Color on screen. And so I kind of was pleasantly reminded that, oh, right, yeah, this is just a play and it's just kind of stripping down bare bones like actors in a story kind of thing.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
I also think on that point, maybe Jamie, maybe you know more about this than I do. It's something I remember hearing about in like a film elective I took during undergrad, but that there are some like old school filmmakers who feel that in order for it to be pure cinema, it must be black and white because color was an imposition that was added that isn't inherent or natural to what film stock does naturally. And I don't know, maybe you know more about that or want to comment, but
yeah, no, I think to me, To me, I'm not one of those purists. Like, I think shoot on digital, shoot on film, color, black and white. To me, that doesn't really make the difference. Here's what I will say though, Jillian, and I think Ryan, you said this too. You bring up a good point because you're like, okay, so that digital look, that black and white, the minimalist set made you feel like you were watching a play on screen. And I felt that through the whole thing. I was like, okay, this isn't a movie, it's a play. Like, it's a piece of theater. It's something expressionist. It's something different. I don't know the right word to describe it, but it took me out of it. But was that the point maybe of it, to kind of maybe make a point that this is a bridge between theater and cinema? Maybe it was trying to be both.
Well, and the fact that it was filmed in the heart of the pandemic, right? Or like the gut, I guess, of the pandemic would be a better anatomy, where like if this was filmed in like 2021, well, actually it was released in 2021. So it would have been filmed probably throughout 2020, or maybe, which to me, that was such an unsettling time for everything. Like, film and TV was still going on, but there was no vaccines. Everything was up in the air. There was no live theater. So like, how interesting is it that this like very mismatched, like, this unidentified piece of media is kind of like, I keep thinking, throughout this whole discussion, I keep thinking of like the broken down shack scene that like the robbers hide behind, and then like I think the old man is found in there again when Ross goes, and seeing that like broken house and then like the fields behind it, like I just keep thinking, this is like a side tangent, but my brain keeps going back to that. And then in talking of this being like, what is this piece of art, right? Like, it was kind of born in a time of our reality of like, what is art right now?
Like that shack scene, Jill, that you're talking about, that calls to my mind not Throne of Blood, but a different Kurosawa film, Rashomon, and the opening scene of that, where we start in a shack like that in black and white, and it's set, I think, in like medieval Japan, or at least like some kind of period where there were still samurai, but it is very clearly about the devastation of the bomb and just feeling that desolateness. And I don't know if we can compare COVID to like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but like it does kind of have that same barren feeling to it that I think everybody watching that can relate to in some way or another.
Yeah, all we were missing was the rain. You know what I mean? That rain in the opening of Rashomon. It also reminds me of a movie by Tarkovsky called Ivan's Childhood, and so many, like, True Detective has copied the imagery with the whole broken house and shack. And it was a beautiful like reference if they were doing that reference. At least I saw that reference. But that one thing with the shack is, I was like, that's a set. I was like, that's a set in my head. But part of me was like, I'm okay with that. Like, I don't know. It's a very weird mix.
Also, Jamie, keep in mind the three of us are theater people, so we are very much like always like, yes, of course it's a set. This is what we're used to. There's film stuff added on top of that. Neat. Whereas you, coming from a film background first and foremost, it's understandable that you would maybe have a different relationship to these things.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, Ryan, like you said it best, because we have that different relationship, right? I'm coming from the film side, you're from the theater side, and maybe this is a movie that brings those two sides together. Kind of,
I think a great one to start the series with.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
Good picking, man.
I tried. Jill, I'm going to let you start the next question, which is, what was your favorite production or design element of the film?
So I feel like I touched on this subtly throughout all my other answers, but I guess it would be like the lighting choices, because like the cinematography in general, but I think the use of light as a quality of the cinematography was really striking to me, and the range of it too. Like, there were a couple like intense light moments, there were like subtle light moments, but every time, like, the reason why I'm able to think of those through is because when light played a part on screen, it was like the forefront. Because a lot of the times, a lot of these images I'm thinking of, it's when there was either no actors or this was coming in or out of a transition, and you had like set light and camera angle were kind of the only players on set before we got the actors back. And so, and I think also the lighting really helped no pun intended, shed light on all these like shape imagery that was happening, right? Like in the do I see a dagger, that dagger before me scene, like with the slats from like the pillars of the building and like the light coming through the slats, creating these like rectangular micro hallways in this long hallway to the dagger that ends up being like it's the handle to the door, but from afar, I thought it was just another smaller version of the rectangular light we were getting on the floor. So I thought, again, that was really cool. That it's like, oh, my favorite design element is playing the dagger. That's cool. Like, so yeah. And I think the fact that we were in black and white too, the light kind of is a character. And so thank goodness it worked out, or it was kind of emphasized or shining. The shining star. I'm having so many light puns right now. It's hurting my stomach.
You're going light on the puns.
Hey. I also really liked, and I guess this would be maybe light can contribute to this, but the use of reflection work was really nice. I don't know what that would fall under, like water cinematography. Like the fact that, you know, our witch spawns out into 3 because her reflection is 3, having the child in the water speaking.
And then he cups it into his hand, and the head's still there.
Yeah.
Well, very Harry Potter.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, so I guess those would be my 2 things. Light and then like water cinematography.
Mind if I piggyback off of
Piggyback away, Ryan.
Well, because you're touching on a lot of the stuff that I was thinking of mentioning too, and I don't know if this could even be called like a specifically production element, but it's a confluence of a lot of things. It's a part of the cinematography, the editing, the writing, but something that I just really appreciated about this was the way it handled specifically the things that directors of like stage versions of this debate about how to handle. And that is those like more abstract, surreal, you know, parts that deal with the witches, the magic, how much of this is magic. These are the things that directors are always like sitting down and debating, like, do I stage the ghost of Banquo, or do I just have him screaming at an empty chair? And like there's, you know, ways, different interpretations of, do I want to communicate that there are supernatural forces afoot, in which case we need to have a ghost on stage, or do I want to communicate that he's losing his mind and the empty chair does that just fine? The solution taken here was that, well, we will see the actor, the ghost of Banquo, which I always thought was funny, is listed as a separate character in the dramatis personae of Shakespeare's script. Like, do they have a separate actor playing the ghost in the Elizabethan theater? I wonder. Like that's neat. But yeah, but we have. Sorry, that was a tangent, but I've always thought that was amusing. So, but yeah, we see the ghost of Banquo visually, but then we cut to him swatting at the crow. So we kind of get both. Like maybe the ghost did materialize, but only he can see it, or maybe he is going mad, and that's certainly what it looks like when he's screaming at a bird. I wanted to piggyback this off of Jill because, yeah, the stuff that you mentioned specifically also really play into this. The dagger, like, is that a dagger I see before me scene? I thought that was so neat because that's another one. The director has to ask, do I put a dagger on stage, or is this just something else that he's hallucinating? The daggers in his mind that are his ambition or whatever, and compelling him to murder. And I like that we, the audience, see the dagger. We are kind of in his subjective mind the same way we are with the ghost. But then we get closer and we realize that's not a dagger. He's seeing daggers and things that are not daggers. It's just the door. And like, is it silly? Is the crow swatting silly? Of course, these things are a little silly, but I loved it in this production that is not trying to be realistic. I love that we kind of do have these campier things that do like make you think, oh, that's clever. Like it's part of the fun of watching it. And yeah, to your other point, Jill, the water reflection, I really loved how we have the Act 4 Scene 1, the Pit of Acheron, where he confronts the witches and gets his fortune told. That seeped into the room where he was sitting in the previous scene and then seeps away. So was all of that a hallucination, or is all of that the magic just materializing around him? And these are the things that are, again, I keep coming back to this point, but they're very theatrical ideas that are very hard to realize effectively in the theater. And that, I think, if you are going to do a film version of this play, you kind of want to do some of those early Buster Keaton-esque stunts of, you know, silly visuals, very Looney Tunes stuff that you can get away with in the apparatus of shooting and editing and post-production that you really can't get away with in the theater when it's all happening immediately right before you.
Jamie?
Well, yeah, both brilliant points. Just to piggyback off Ryan's point, you know, now that you both explained kind of where you're coming from and you see it, and especially from the ghost scene, because originally when I watched it, I was like, oh, but they don't show the ghosts. Like
Briefly,
I
he popped in a couple moments. Yeah.
went by the door or something. Yeah, but I'm always expecting, oh, it's got to be the ghost standing before him. They do that in Throne of Blood. I think they did that in the Fassbender version too. I'm not sure. Okay. And I was sort of disappointed by that, but you make such a solid point that we don't know what's real, what's in his head. They kind of leave it open-ended, which I really like with the ravens and all that stuff. Maybe Ross is somehow mingling in there, or there's something we don't know.
Is
right?
Ross a real person, or is he just a deity of the witch? And he's kind of like that Maleficent crow that is there, that just kind of can move and change. Exactly.
So it leaves a lot to think about, which I think is I think it's a better move. I think it's not a safer move. I just think it's a better move because it brings up discussions like we're having now, right? You can talk about the movie after you saw it. You can have your theories. I would say for me, one production element that stood out, and this might seem very simple, but I agree with Jillian completely. The light, the movement of the light. There's a scene where Lady Macbeth is laying back on her, I think it's a bed, and there's like space above her head where there's light moving around as she's lying there, and she's saying a monologue about something she's plotting, and it's almost like the light is moving as her mind is moving in a sense and plotting, and it was so cool. It stood out for me. I wrote it in my notes. I was just like, wow, that's such an interesting way to do it. I think the curtains, I love the curtains. Again, I'm going to reference Persona because, there's a lot of curtains used in that. Then that's a big movie about identity and who we are and our shadows and our demons. I thought curtains and the curtains are constantly moving too. So there's all this like movement. It's almost like it's like waves. It's beautifully done. And I agreed with the dagger. What a different way to do it. What a different way. Like the door handle. Brilliant. So yeah, those were probably my standouts too.
Love it. I mean, I don't know what's. You've all kind of covered my points because I had things like the magic of the film, the whole is it real, is it not real? That was really well done. Cinematography. But my other third point there was just the editing, just those beautiful scene transitions were just so well choreographed and well done that it was always just moving. And once again, just like on stage, where like Richard talked about how they chose to stage the death of Banquo almost in the Vom of the festival stage so they could bring the big banquet table out in the dark. So the minute the Fly Fleon's Fly lights up is that same type of thing here where there's not one of those slow, drawn out transitions. Everything just seemed to flow like blood from like an open wound where it's just boom, it's just going. Once the cut happens, it doesn't stop. And that's the great thing there. It's just that whole piece. It just never quite stops moving. Like just like what's her name's body as the witch when she's doing her contortion routine.
Yeah,
she's always moving. The witch was always kind of either very bird-like. Like once again, the whole concept of a murder of crows, which is what, or a murder of ravens. That whole thing of a flock of these types of birds fits thematically with everything. Is that thing of there was something always about this that it always felt like a bit like a fly on the wall because the way the editing choices of let's turn just a little bit here so it almost feels like you're listening from behind a pillar or you're the one in the shadows that are now catching this conversation in the moment. That type of thing there. So I think the editing was another really strong way that they kind of just kept it. Like once again, pace is big in this film, and that's the one big thing that Fassbender's thing lacked big was editing. And this was a stark difference. It was just that way that they just were able to move this play along at such a good pace that I think they could have given more time to breathe. They added a few more silent scenes in to kind of help ground the main couple. But the editing was just had such a good pace to it that it really kind of moved things along really well. So, yeah. All right, Ryan, I'm letting you start this one because I got a feeling you got a lot to say as our man of adaptations. So let's begin. So this adaptation made a few cuts and alterations to the source material while translating the play into a film. How do you feel these changes work? Is there any one change in particular that you would like to comment on? If you were not fond of a particular change, what would you recommend to fix it?
Cool. Yeah, so I feel like I don't even need to belabor this point because we've already kind of hinted at the big one that I want to talk about, and that's the Ross presence, which I have a feeling others will want to comment on as well. There are like other smaller things I could mention. One thing I really liked is I'll just briefly touch on this. There's a long dialogue between, I think it's either the end of Act 4 or the top of Act 5, between Malcolm and Macduff right after his family is murdered and before
that
he gets
scene.
I had a very good English teacher who explained, the very significant importance of this scene, that Malcolm, who's seen the corrupting influences of a bad king, as in Macbeth taking over, Malcolm wants to test Macduff's loyalty, make sure that this guy with a similar sounding name isn't gonna similarly have a murderous coup, and that, this is someone he could trust, and it also reinforces to the audience that Malcolm is a good person and he will be the better king. So yeah, there's like a lot of understandable political reasons about also this being a propaganda piece in Shakespeare's time of why this scene exists, but it just kills the pace in like a very high stakes moment because it's so long and like such a back and forth dialogue thing right after Macduff's family just got murdered and before we find out that he his heartbreaking reaction to it. So they cut most of that R.I.P., but I'm fine with that. I thought that was a good, like, Mac, you commented on how the pace was really well done here. I would agree, and I think little trims like that are a big part of why. Okay, that was my one detour. Let's talk about Ross. Ross, I already kind of mentioned a lot of this when I was talking about the actor, but they added all of these, like, interesting little scenes or putting him in scenes that he previously wasn't in, and that, to me, I think was one of the strongest things about this film. And I can understand why some people might not like that, although I don't think that's the opinion of anyone in this particular Zoom room by how I can understand how some maybe Shakespeare purists would not like that because, like, who the hell is Ross? Like, why is he the character that we're getting? Like, all
I'm
this
pretty
stuff.
sure
And I think
played him in Stratford.
Well, he did. And, like, yeah, but it's interesting that this is a character who, really doesn't do a lot. He's in a lot of scenes, but he's not a huge player. He's not someone you really think about, aside from the dialogue that he has with Lady Macduff right before she gets murdered. Like, he doesn't really have a lot of prominent feature moments. But in my mind, he's the perfect character to do this with because he's so prominent enough that you remember that he's there, but not so prominent that you think of him as this, like, major contributor. And what I really loved about this in particular is that as somebody who knows the play very well, like intimately, like the back of my hand, I've read it so many times, I've seen so many different stage productions and film adaptations of it, that was the one thing that really made me lean in and be like, what's happened? Where is this and that's something that I love about a good adaptation, that it's playing upon the knowledge that you already have of the source to really make you excited when things are changed. That's why every adaptation theorist hates the idea that we judge adaptations by the standard of fidelity, how faithful it is to its source, and if it deviates from its source, therefore it's bad, because it is particularly in these changes, in these differences, that we take notice, that we actually can understand how the mechanism is at play here, what creative decisions have been made. And every time Ross was on scene, I was like, wow, is he going to kill Fleance? And then he just that one little glance peering out the window of, when the riders are coming in to kill Lady Macbeth and the family, I was like, oh my God, like this didn't require adding a single line. And in that scene in particular, there were other scenes where they did add lines. And it was just, using that silence so well. And then, like, at the very end, when we finally do get to see, okay, what was his end game? And, he, pledges fealty to Malcolm, and he has been hiding Fleance this whole time. You realize, like, to kind of live in the medievalism of it a little bit, and because we've mentioned Game of Thrones a couple times already, he's Littlefinger. Like, Ross is, playing this four-dimensional chess, playing both sides, and really calling all the shots from a very silent position. Like, and Jill, I see you making faces. I'm
gonna burst. I'm gonna wait till you're done, but like I gotta piggyback off.
I'm happy to put a pin.
I got a Ross bomb drop.
Okay, put a pin there. I might comment on what other people bring up, but that's kind of the main point I want to raise, that just Ross's presence really had me on the edge of my seat in a way like very few of these adaptations, even other ones that I love, do, because they tend to be very faithful to the beats of the plot. Go for it.
Can I go?
Yes,
okay. So I had the exact same feeling of Ross, Ryan. I was intrigued by Ross's purpose in this piece, especially because he was given so much more agency and like marionette privileges. Like he almost seemed like puppet master at a time, right? And again, double agent, all knowing. He's kind of literally carrying the story along, being present when he kind of wants to be present. And I had this epiphany today while writing out my notes. I'm like, he's Joel Cohen. He's the director. Like, I thought about that. Again, you literally just said he's calling the shots. And I'm like, this is so cool. And I actually like looked up, I was like, what does Joel look like again? I'm like, oh my God, him and Alex like kind of had resemblance a little bit. But like, I doubt he was like, Alex, your whole goal is to be me in Macbeth. Like, I don't think that was it. But like, because there was such a stark like presence of this character, and then being like showing up when he wants to, like there's so many scenes where I'm like, why is Ross here? I'm like, oh my God, how did he not say that? Or how did he, right? And then looking back at it today, I was like, oh my God, that's like a cool way of like almost like the director. And then seeing the last scene of him like with Fleance on the horse riding off, again, it was like he was like preserving or bringing purpose to Fleance's fate. Like quite often, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, but usually like Fleance after the death of Banquo, he's just off screen, right?
He's never seen again.
So
fly, Fleance, fly.
Yeah, if I could comment on that a bit. So what's interesting about the character of Fleance is that James I, who had recently become King of England at the time when this play was written, interesting that Shakespeare says, hey, now we really need a play about Scottish history. Well, that's because the new king was Scottish, loved witchcraft. He was like super obsessed about that. So
we're a lot of people there.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other thing. But James I was a descendant of Banquo and Fleance's line, like the actual those figures from Scottish history. So although we never see Fleance again after his father is killed and he just runs away, that loose thread is Shakespeare's hat tip towards these characters are no longer agents in the story, but the witch's prophecy is correct. Your children and great-great-grandchildren will be kings, literally the King of England, who's sitting in the audience right now.
Yeah, I see. So it was, it's okay. No, it was just cool, like, seeing him ride off with him. I literally, and then having it in the back of my mind of, like, Joel Cohen is Ross or whatever, I'm like, Macbeth 2, LOL? Like, that's like, this is the setting us up for, like, a second to the tragedy of Macbeth. Like, and I just had this question in my mind and, like, to bring forth, like, it's not even, like, to answer per se, but, like, what does it mean by showing us that he's still alive? Like, I get you just gave us the historical backing, Ryan, but, like, in this particular adaptation, like, what does it mean by showing us he's still alive and under the wing, no pun intended, of Ross, right? Like, under his kind of guise. Yeah, we don't have to unpack that or answer that. I just, like, that came into my mind, and I love leading a piece and asking questions more so than getting answers. So that was just, like, really, really cool. And then just really quickly before just two other things that's not Ross. Again, I said The Witch, loved The Witch. I thought it was so unique and a very easily done, making that character one that I wish we see more of that. Now that's kind of been cracked open. And one other thing that was, like, parts of the adaptation that didn't work for me, and I don't necessarily know how I would particularly fix it, but either fully show Lady M's death or fully not. I didn't like that.
Ross was present for that too.
Yeah,
Did he push her down the stairs?
But I didn't like that she was, like, on the edge of the stairs, and then the next time we see her, she's face down. Like, I know she's gonna fall down the stairs. Like, I get that by you putting her on the top of the stairs. But, like, I want to see her do that. Or, like, do what the production usually does, where she's off stage and it's assumed that we get word that she's died. Right? Like, it didn't really do anything for me how they kind of staged that or how that shook out. Like, again, it just, I felt bad for Frances because I was like, this downfall is just really going downhill more and more. Like the choices here are not helping you. So that's me.
Jamie?
I agree with everybody's points. The more we talk about Ross, the more questions and theories I get about this movie. And I think that makes it so good because you can talk about this movie so much and you can dissect why is he there? Who is he? Is he like an ancient one that's always been around? Does he work for the witch? Is he the witch? What is he? But I think one thing that I really loved about the ending, usually, and correct me if I'm wrong, because usually I believe Macbeth ends with, Malcolm taking the crown and then saying, "All hail the king," or whatever the line is. But to me, and that's a fine ending. Like, I'm not dissing Shakespeare. Don't get the knives out. But I think this ending with him going over this hill with this boy and this, like, the music, that's one thing as well. The soundtrack, once it's certain things, the soundtrack kicks in certain times, it hits you. It's like this haunting music. And him going over, it kind of gave you a sense of hope. Like, for me, at least, it was like, okay, it's not just this king getting crowned and then there's going to be someone else taking, executing him or betraying him, and it's going to go on and on and on and on and on. To me, it gave like a sense of hope that they're now out in the wilderness. He saved this kid's life. But then the crows come in and then it just goes boom. And you're like, okay, whoa, like, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Who is this guy? It was a cool ending. And I think that ending just sold it for me. I'm like, this is a really unique version of the play. And that's really all I had to say.
Yeah, I'd like to actually add to what you're saying. If you remember, the Polanski movie doesn't just end on "All Hail the New King," but it adds this weird little scene at the end, which I think is taking what we just saw here, takes some visual cues from, of Donalbain, Malcolm's brother, who you probably have already forgotten about because, of course, he's barely.
He goes to Ireland.
Yeah, he goes to Ireland and he doesn't come back to have a revolution against Macbeth, and we never see him again. But yeah, Polanski's vision was that, well, what happens to Donalbain? I feel like all of these auteur directors are like, but what about the minor character that everyone's forgotten about? What do we do with them? And and it ends with Donalbain going to visit the witches, and that is like almost setting up this like, where is this going, creepy sequel vibe of, which I thought was really interesting when I saw it for the first time. I'm like, whoa, that's really cool. What an interesting idea. And I think that maybe even so, this leads of what I was just describing of me loving adaptations, taking these like big changes that recontextualize other things that, you think if you're familiar with the material.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, so I'll say for me, I'll be quick. With this adaptation, what I really liked was Joel, because he wrote the screenplay, was his choice to intercut scenes. So, like the whole Lady M first scene where she gets the letter and blah, blah, blah. That whole scene is a very long scene. That there's a lot of setup. There's a lot of going on in that scene. But the fact that they chose to cut back to the tent after she gets the letter and burns the letter, like it just added a much more cinematic quality to this, which made it feel less like just a straight adaptation or like a pro shot of a play. Like the fact that we were able to do some cross cutting and intercut scenes really kind of, I enjoyed that because it allowed, once again, it all tied back to the pace and the editing. It made things move a bit faster. It made you eager to get back because the minute you cut off Frances McDormand's opening speech to cut back somewhere else, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I know there's more to this. Where, let's get back to her. It's that thing of, it was that kind of great. It always left you a little bit in a lurch with the way they were able to intercut some moments and some scenes, and just also elevate some of those minor scenes, like the scene after the Duncan's death, and they're talking about how the land is acting funny, the horses are fighting each other, and the fact that the witch has now been given that role, or she's disguised as the hermit, is a nice touch too. But the fact that we were able to kind of highlight some of those more minor scenes and kind of do stuff with them was really nice. So I really enjoyed it. The one thing I will say that was my biggest gripe is I wanted more combat. I wanted to see the opening battle. I wanted to see the death of the old Thane of Cawdor. I wanted the fight to be longer between Denzel and Macduff there. Like, that's the one thing I've yet to see a film do it. But it's like, this film could have such a big scope to it, like big battle scenes, like the whole thing of Dunsany coming to the castle. is like, I want to see that happen where it's like, they've made ladders out of trees. They made the battering ram out of the trees. Like literally the forest is sieging the castle and you're getting a big fight. And it's like, we get one little fight where Denzel kind of flicks blood at the guy and then shanks him. And I'm like, ugh. Like,
I did love that one fight with young Seward. And that's and that's another one that I think is kind of an interesting, it's something that directors need to decide, like when they're staging this is, I've seen versions where it's, Macbeth is at the end of his rope, he's losing his power, so young Seward puts up a big fight, but Macbeth still kills him because not of a woman born, etc., etc. Yeah. But what I did like about this version, just how like easily he dispatched him, that like it wasn't even like a trouble for him. He didn't even have a sword for like the first bit of the fight, and he's just like dodging it. Like I thought that was really cool, that like even though he's losing, he knows he's lost, he still has this prophecy keeping him going, and that he just feels invincible.
But then I wanted more of that. Like I almost wanted like that first murder in the battle then kicks off almost like the Terminator, where he's just like moving through the castle, just hacking people down. And then of course you have Macduff doing the turn, hellhound turn, and then that's that great moment of okay, final fight. Here we go. He's mowed down a number of other people. Now I don't know if that's because of COVID, the fact they couldn't get a lot of people on the sets, or if that was a directorial choice.
Budget maybe.
I don't know. I'm just like, I just want to see it bigger. Like the fact is, like on stage you can only do so much on the Stratford Festival stage to stage some of these big battles that they talk about. And it reminds me of how in Lord of the Rings, when Tolkien saw this play, he was very upset the fact that when he thought about the trees coming to Dunsinane, and then it's just actors with branches in their hair. Hence why he writes The Siege of Isengard, where the Ents come and tear down towers, because he's like, I want to see the forest literally march and destroy a castle. Like he's like, so I'm like, that's the thing where I'm like, I wish like they did sometimes where they were able to play into the cinema and really play into that ability that you can do with cameras and tricks and things like that. But then there were other ones where I'm like, give me a little bit more. Like let's have Denzel kill 2 more people before he gets to Macduff. Show me a little bit more of the battle in the castle in Macduff, or in Macbeth just listening in the throne room as like we're cutting back to people getting killed and thrown off the wall. Like, give me a little bit more, because there's moments where the castle seems busy and full.
Yes.
And then there's other moments where it's like there's nobody there, and it's like, hold on, we're sieging a castle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That should be this scene where there's just frenzy on screen and just Macbeth sitting alone in the throne room, just waiting for someone to come and engage him so he can join the fray. It's that resolute thing of, I know the end is coming, who's coming for me first? And I'll pick you off. It's a good strategy move too. Let the enemy come to you versus you going after them. Either way.
Remind me, does Lady M die before that scene between Mackers and young Stewart?
Yes,
she does.
Yeah.
Okay, so even more so, and again, maybe this boils down to like the OG relationship thing of like, and talking about the magic too. Like to me, Lady M and Mackers should have a relationship that is like so intense and so real that it is almost like demonized. Like it's like magic itself is fusing these together, right? And then we usually see that it's Lady M is the catalyst and Macbeth is the container that has to carry stuff through. So even more so if that's like the case or the setup, when she dies, I see that too as like whatever force she was is now infused into Macbeth to almost make him like this like superhuman, like now the physicality and the emotionality and mentality is fusing, right? Especially if their relationship is so intertwined and so like they don't work as individuals, they work with each other. When now that she's been cut off and severed, he's like a wild beast, like just like very untamed, right? And so I agree with that, Mac. Like it's like there needed to be even keeping in maybe the subtle choices that they wanted Macbeth to have in this for various reasons. There needed to be some sort of stepping stone bridging or like weight of the like of the loss of
agreed
too,
because it felt like the same kind of like chilled out acting even when he was like going like she's dead, come on, like your kingdom is falling, don't be so chill to Macduff, like this, come on, like, you know. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
agree.
guess I'll devil's advocate this a little
Ooh.
bit, because I do think in the text it's very interesting, the framing of him being informed that your wife is dead, and then his first line after is, "She should have died hereafter. There would have been time for such a word." It's not like "Oh no, my wife, she was like my anchor or my partner in crime." Like, it's like this quiet, resigned, like at this point, especially because we see her mentally deteriorating in a way that we don't quite see the same from him. He is getting further and further into the lust for power and preserving what he has and killing whoever's required, when she's like, "Okay, I started this, but like I think this is going too far, man. Out damn spot." Like, to me, I see. And then after he says that line, he goes into tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow and just has this quiet pontification on life and mortality and existentialism. He's kind of a husk at that point. And I think this production did communicate that well. And even when he's having his battle with young Seward, he is kind of still a husk. He's not getting like pleasure in like fucking with this guy and like, doing like, "Haha, I am the best soldier in all of Scotland." Like, and there's no rage to it also. Like, he's just like, "I'm here. I was told that no man born of woman can kill me, so like, what are you gonna do?" Like, I think that's interesting. That maybe we've talked a lot about the understated performances in this one. If I see, and I've seen a lot of good productions of Macbeth that have done this in other films, where you build the tension to an apex right before this point, and then it's a sharp fall down. And that's what the tomorrow and tomorrow monologue really is. That moment of enlightenment, but we've gone too far to prevent this from being a tragedy, even if I've realized how futile it all is.
I've steeped in blood too far to turn or back.
I also feel like too, and this is just like now picking hairs, but Ryan, just to kind of devil's advocate your
Yeah, please
devil's
do.
advocacy.
Oh boy.
But I think
What
there's
have
a
I done?
there's a line reading that can go one way or another. I think what you're saying of when the delivery of Lady Macbeth's death and him taking that in, and you're saying like, oh, taking like it kind of like he's a husk and he's like reflecting, or like maybe he has this moment of that also could be played with a bubbling mania inside, or like the very calm, cool, and collected killer too, right? Of like that the internally, like that's so like a dynamite is going off inside, but the exterior is just keeping it contained until the moment is right? Like, I don't know. I feel like again, that's like basically, if I was directing this piece, it'd be like blood and sweat and sex and all the things. So
I
like,
think like that's a good interpretation. But if I could play devil's advocate to your devil's advocate to my
God.
devil's advocate,
Oh my god!
This panel is going to be as long as our review of Stratford, which I think that was also very long.
Just the last point, and then we can move on. But I do think why I'm happy that there isn't that like pulsing anger beneath the surface is because we get that from Macduff when he finds out that his wife died. And that is someone who loves his wife and is furious at what happened. And the fact that we don't see that from Macbeth is why he is our villain at the end.
True. Anything you say about Macduff, you got me. I'm on board.
I agree with both points.
Yes. It's very much a directorial choice.
Yeah.
And for me, I just felt the third act of the film should have just been a bigger battle, because you're on film. Go for it. Be big. Be big and have fun with that. Have a longer sword fight.
I blame COVID. I feel like that you
I know.
nail on the head with that.
Yeah, COVID probably really did hamper this in many ways. All right, let's get into the last question. Would you recommend this particular film adaptation of Macbeth for other viewers to watch? Jamie, you came in saying you were very hesitant about seeing the film yourself, and then after seeing it, you gave it an 8 out of 10. Now we've kind of maybe talked it down a few points. Where are you standing now at the end of this review? Would you still recommend it to people?
Yeah, I would say it's a solid 8 still. I think and again, I think it comes down to the changes they made in the story. It comes down to what they did with Ross, what they did with different characters, how they, we talk about director's choice a lot, like through this podcast, that's a directorial choice. It felt like such a director's film. It felt like this is from a singular artist who has a version of Macbeth in his mind. And I think it's a really great version. I think it's great to show in schools as well. It's, it's an hour 45. It doesn't drag. It's, it's beautiful to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would still say 8 out of 10. I think it's fantastic. I think it's really, really good. Would I go 9 or 10? No. Maybe I need to watch it a few more times to maybe on multiple viewings, you can find more to look at and notice and explore. So, yeah, I'm sticking with 8 out of 10. I really liked it.
Awesome. Ryan, would this make your syllabus?
Well, syllabus arbitrary in this case, and I don't feel comfortable giving it a number score, but I will say yes, I would recommend it, but there are some qualifiers on that, and mainly I would not recommend this as someone's first entrance into Macbeth, because all of the things that I've commented on throughout this entire discussion that I love the most are the things that I appreciate because of how well I already know Macbeth. And like the changes with Ross and just like the visual sequences that really augment things that already existed in the text, all of that, just I had so much just like visual and story pleasure encountering these because of my prior familiarity with the material.
That's a great point.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say like, oh, you've never seen a production of Macbeth before, watch this movie. Like, if it, again, go back to what I said at the beginning, if it wasn't for the unfortunate things we know about the director, the Polanski movie kind of always would have been my go-to for that, because for all of its creative and artistic flourishes, it is still very much a straightforward version of the story in many ways. And it was the one that my high school English teacher showed me. And I think it does kind of serve that function. I would be very interested to, show this to high school students as a compliment to their reading, and then see in their exams how many people talk about, oh yeah, and then Ross comes in Macbeth, and like, okay, so you didn't read the play, you just watched the movie. Like that would be funny, but I think, for just educational purposes, to give students just an idea of what does Macbeth look like when it's performed, I feel like that Stratford one that we reviewed
with Ian Lake.
Ian Lake. I think that's just like a solid, straightforward, this is what it looks like with really talented actors. Have fun. So
might be interested sorry to interrupt, might be interested in showing them both and being able to compare with students and talk about it.
When you guys are talking about the Polanski one, are you talking about the one where Patrick Stewart was Mackers?
No.
This is okay, that's 70s. The only Macbeth that I know aside from this. And that's my favorite one.
Did it. Ryan, it was from the 70s, right?
I've never seen the Polanski one. And I probably never will now, but the Patrick Stewart one, a lot of blood, a lot of gore, a lot of sweat. It's good.
Yeah, like, and Jamie, to your point, I am very much in favor of people should watch as many adaptations of the same source as possible, and it cultivates your appreciation of the art of adaptation, of the kind of decisions that you'd be making, of filmmaking, of dramaturgy, of acting, and design. Like, all of these things you just get more and more invested in the more different versions you see. So if this was like an adaptation kind of theory course specifically of films, I would definitely like want to show like different versions, including this one and a bunch of others, and then kind of pick apart the nuances of what is done differently in each instance. But I think when we're looking at, do I show students a production of Macbeth, this one versus that one, we're usually thinking high school kids or maybe undergrads in a Shakespeare course. And for that, I feel like the more straightforward, the better as like an entranceway into the text.
Jill?
Yeah, so just to like to add to that, exactly, I'm on the same line as Ryan of, I would say, yes, I would recommend you watch this, but with the caveat that, in my opinion, this isn't the best version of just, regardless of the fact that it's not like married to the text, but just personal opinion, but it is the artsier and like most experimental version of it. So I think I would say watch the Patrick Stewart version first, and also watch this though, because I think regardless of what course it's being shown at or taught, I'm of the notion like literally exploit adaptation, like have your kid, like, this is just like a tiny tangent, but when I was Rapunzel Panto this past spring, characters were different, but the amount of kids that were like, Where's Pascal? Because Pascal is the chameleon friend in Tangled, which is one version of Rapunzel. And Ryan was working as an ASM on that production. And I remember I got backstage and I was like, if we have kids, we are reading every single adaptation of every single story to them. So they're not like perseverating over the one iteration of one thing, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this is a fascinating piece of cinema to show through like a classics class or like a grade 11 or grade 12 class reading it, or like an undergrad Shakespeare. It's encouraging and reminding that there is playground when you take text and put it on screen or on stage. Not everything has to be the same pretty packaged deal of what it has always been, right? So yeah, that's my take on that.
Yeah, I would say for me that I really think this piece is unique because it was made during the COVID lockdown, so it really is a time capsule moment of what was the film industry up to in the early parts of the pandemic. How did they adapt? How did they do it? And I think for the such limitations that were put on the film, whether it's the Apple TV budget, which I know it's still a growing production company. I'm sure after its win with Coda, it may now be getting a bit more recognition. Maybe the films will get a bigger budget. But at the time, Apple TV is still growing. So I'm sure the budget wasn't massive. It wasn't the biggest budget in the world. So, I mean, the fact that they did so good with such certain limitations they had, it was really a kudos to them. I would say compared to the last film adaptation with Michael Fassbender, which literally put me to sleep 3 times trying to watch that movie.
It's the shortest tragedy.
I know. Their pace was horrible.
It's the slow motion fight scenes. That's what did it.
See, I never want to see slow motion in Macbeth. That kills it.
Zack Snyder directed? Like, why was there slow motion?
Yeah, I know.
No, I forget who directed it though, but I'm like, give me more energy, give me more pace, and that's what this one had. So this is a marked improvement over the last film adaptation. So if I were showing modern audiences, or if they're like, which film adaptation, because really these came out like back to back almost, like only a few years apart from each other, which one should I watch? I'd be like, this one. Just because,
but really watch Patrick Stewart's version. Sorry,
I
that's
do like
still
that's
still modern.
Wood is in it, and she plays Lady M, and she's a great actress as well. I watched that in grade 11 because that's when it came out on PBS. Was grade 11, and Patrick Stewart. It was almost like a Cold War Russia era. They set that one in, which is really cool. So that's a solid version. And then also you have the Ian McKellen and Judi Dench. Iconic.
Classic.
And that one was also very much in black and white as well. So there you go. But yeah, there's definitely this is definitely a solid film that I would absolutely recommend a watch of. Yeah, I'm solidly in the camp for this. Bravo. And on this note, we will wrap up our very first episode of Screened Plays, the newest show to join the Cup. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us for this inaugural pilot episode. Please let our listeners and viewers know where they can find you, where they can find your film's social pages. Just let us know where can we get more of you, because you're fantastic.
You're too kind. I feel like this is on like Hot Ones where they're like, tell us what you got going on. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me, Ryan, Jillian, Mac. Lovely talking to all of you. I would love to just connect another time and just talk more film and theater. Work together down the line. Let's make it happen. You can find me. Here's my plug. My Instagram is Jamie Knox Films. You can find me there. There's a film coming out. Hopefully that's going to be done this year, and that's in post-production, called The Pine Still Whisper. You can find that on IG as well. It's called The Pine Still Whisper. You'll find our page. And yeah, I have a film coming out hopefully in the festivals next year. So yeah, and I'm just thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Can't wait.
We're definitely going to have you back. We got a whole list of films to get through. So
please,
we will absolutely bring you back as a regular for this program, for sure. As well as many of our other programs as well.
Love that.
Welcome to the fold. Get ready.
I love it.
A lot more messages.
One of us.
I've joined the cult. Love it.
Yes.
Jill, where can people find and follow you?
Yes, as per usual, you can follow my artist Instagram account, Jillian.Robinson. For the time being, I'm posting some song covers, some, past projects, etc., and just keep your eyes peeled for future stuff coming up down the line.
Love it. Ryan, give us a classic Ryan Borochovitz send-off.
It's not that classic.
It is a classic.
Very active on social media, so don't bother trying to find me. Minor plug, though, I'm currently working on the Howland Company's production of Three Sisters as an assistant dramaturg, which is opening on, I believe, October 26th and runs until November 12th. So coming up on the horizon when this episode will be released. So if you're in Toronto and want to come to Heart House Theatre and check that out, pretty proud of the work we're doing. It's really exciting. But yeah, note, don't need to follow me. Just follow the Cup of Hemlock Theatre, COH Theatre, on all platforms. Pretty much everything I share on my own socials are just these episodes when they go live. So then you're not missing much by not following me.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you can find and follow me at all social media platforms at Mackenzie Horner. You also can follow my musical antics with Before the Downbeat, a musical podcast. Our season 5 has been slightly delayed, but that is okay. We have some other great counter programming where we will be featuring Jill, who's going to be joining us for some live movie musical commentaries. She will be joining us for Little Shop of Horrors, starring Rick Moranis in a very fun plant puppet. And then she'll also be joining us for her first ever experience watching the dreaded, much maligned film adaptation of Cats.
Oh.
Yes.
Have fun. Have fun.
We
Fill
just
this with
praised.
wine. No.
We just
Yes, I was
praised.
gonna say.
We just praised Ian McKellen and Judi Dench, and then we have to bring up their saddest moment on film.
Yes. Yes.
Oh well.
Either way, it will be fun. So yes, check out the social media for that. We'll be releasing the dates for when those screenings will be happening, and you can live stream along with us. It'll be a lot of fun there. But then for now, everybody, stay healthy, stay safe, and we will see you all in our next episode. Until then, double, toil and trouble, fire burn, and cauldron bubble.
Cheers.